Orphaned Love. Gart pulled back, his whip flying behind him. The boy huddled before him, trembling with fear. Words of apology stuttering out the child's muddy lips. Tears of exhaustion streaking his filthy face. A shriek coming as Gart's arm raced forward, followed by the snap of the thong. The lash struck a rock a hand's width from Aya's ear. If the boy kept this up, Gart would have no choice but to hit him. But right now, Sergeant Thornton was too far away to see the miss. Get up and move now, Gart said, winking as he did, hoping Aya wouldn't force him to strike him with more than an eyelash. The 12-year-old boy gave the orphan driver a slight smile as he stumbled to his feet and took his place in the wagon harness beside the three other orphans, prepared to pull the cart full of food and clothing forward to the front line. Lan, the oldest, a 14-year-old girl who would soon graduate to either the army or motherhood, a girl who was only slightly dirtier than a pig in a mud pit, whose grimy exterior hid the horrors of an 8-year orphanage. This girl lightly touched Aya and smiled at him as he took his place on the team. Lan never spoke, always did what she was asked, and always smiled encouragement to her brothers and sisters in bondage. Gart had checked her tongue and found it whole. Lan's orphan years must have stolen her voice. Gart watched the children fall in line, holding back his smile at their care for each other. Don't strike just once. Gart, you shouldn't need me to show you how to use the whip, Thornton said. You are an orphan yourself and know the need for discipline. The orphan driver did not turn to face the sergeant. He knew the sergeant's idea of discipline, a steady parade of lashes and insults, supported by worse. Gart had experienced them all before he came of age, did his 20 years in the army, and moved on to the orphan driver's life. He'd rather go back to the other end of the lash himself if it weren't for Layla and the girls. I get results my way. You get orphans napping along the road. These children have hauled the wagon for 12 weeks now, taking weapons and food forward, bringing bodies back. It's been a long day. Don't make excuses for them. Thornton had stepped around and now stood face to face with Gart, except Gart's eyes were level with the sergeant's chin. Our job is to get results from them using whatever means necessary. It's the immortal Emperor's commandment. Have you forgotten that? Gart understood the sergeant. He'd seen the laughter when Thornton used a whip or a bludgeon. Gart had seen orphans emerge from Thornton's tent at night, crying and retching. Sergeant Thornton was a bully, and if there was one thing Gart understood, it was bullies. He had been dealing with them all his life, and he knew exactly how to treat them. Yes, Sergeant, I'm sure you're right. I'll be firmer in the future. You give in to bullies because they have the power. But when you give in, you lie. Thornton smiled, nodded, and stepped back, fondling his bludgeon as he turned and walked towards Gart's team. Did you have some news for me, Sergeant? Now the orphans were moving, all but running as they hauled the fully loaded cart forward, small feet slamming through the mud in an attempt to put distance between themselves and the discipline that at least some of them likely thought they deserved. Yes, but I don't like it. You're getting another team, and this one with a younger crew. You'll have 6 more orphans to manage. Try not to let them walk all over you. Don't make me take charge. No, he wouldn't let that happen. But 6 more orphans and young ones? How could he manage them? making them productive, getting the work done, protecting them from Thornk and any other sadist with power who came along. Oh, we've been commanded to get the orphans to the front for a special project. The immortal emperor's special projects were never good news for the orphans. The man must hate children. Throughout Gart's life, the orphans were beaten and killed, all at the word of their supreme, infallible ruler who'd gotten them into this war. An hour later, Thornk and a driver Gart didn't recognize, a slender woman with eyes who were strangers to sleep, brought the team to him. Thornk winked and smiled as he said, "Darnkush here was too soft. Tried to mother them up. They were too slow." Thornk looked down at one waif, a boy only 6 with dirty blonde hair and a skinny body marked by bruises and cuts across the back. "I had to make an example of 1 or 2 of them." Thornk and Darnkush walked away, the unspoken threat bellowing through Gart's head. Thornk might not even care if Gart got them moving. The sergeant had a fondness for young children that turned Gart's stomach. His hand tightened on the whip as he watched them walk away. In Gart's heart, he killed Thornk 100 times. In his head, he knew there would be another sergeant, and he wouldn't be there to protect his children. What would happen to Darnkush? There wasn't much for a field orphan driver. She'd go back to the army, where she'd enter the front line and likely not last long. Gart hoped she didn't have sons or daughters, destined for the orphan pool once she was no longer living. The immortal emperor had no use for failure, and no resources to waste on anything other than war. So far, the Wizard's Republic was frustrating him, locking him in a bloody stalemate. But he wouldn't give up, and he bent the Empire's full resources toward the war, reaching for glory, seeking victory, slaughtering his subjects. The Emperor's ambition struck these children as surely as any whip. Gart squatted in front of the new crew. The blonde-haired boy immediately looked away, avoiding eye contact, as if fearing an older man's pupils. Memories screamed at Gart, memories of himself at that age, already 3 years an orphan, memories of a different, yet identical war. For this child's sake, Gart had to bring him under command. "Boy, look at me when I look at you. Face me and tell me your name." The child slowly turned toward him, tears at the edges of his eyes, tiny muscles ridged along his arms, a frown pasted on his face. The teeth gritted as he said, "I am Tone." Anger would serve Tone well, giving him the spirit to push forward, holding the crushing sadness at bay, causing Gart endless trouble until he won the orphan's trust. If he won the orphan's trust. "Well, Tone and the rest of you, I need you to listen. Darnkush was kind to you, and you took advantage of her. What did that get you? Did you enjoy getting to know Sergeant Thornk?" Heads dropped. One girl blushed. 3 of them went white-knuckled as they grasped their harnesses. "I didn't think so. When I was an orphan, I didn't care for those like him. I don't want to hurt you. But you have to work for me. You have a choice. Work hard or accept punishment. I won't promise to never say an ugly word to you, and I won't promise to never hit you. But I will promise that the only thing I care about is getting the work done. Beating children, that's not my idea of fun, and I don't think it makes me a bigger man. I've been one of you. You do not have to trust me. I'm not your father, but I expect you to work for me. Pull as hard as you can, as fast as you can, and your life will be better. Now stand up and move." Tone and 2 others sat and stared. Gart cracked his whip above their heads, wishing he could let them rest, show them some gentleness, let his care show. But that wasn't the world he lived in. They stood and walked, drawing the cart forward, slower than he'd like, starting like snails dragging granite shells. He cracked the whip again, and they picked up speed. But the whole time, Tone glared over his shoulder at him, judging him. Gart collapsed into his bed that night. Thorn had been like a buzzard the whole day, circling, sometimes hidden, periodically appearing where least desired. And Gart continuously moved from cart to cart, quietly encouraging at times, cracking the whip always, reminding the children of their duty, pushing his disgust deep inside. How he loathed himself, but there was no way out. Each and every one of these orphans was special too, even the ones just arrived, but he couldn't let them know that, couldn't treat them that way. He was an orphan driver, and his job was not to nurture. His job was to inflict pain and exploit, the worst job in the world, and the most impossible to escape. If he ran, Santhan, Theory, and Hanla would all be declared orphans, rounded up and added to the work gangs, while the Empire conscripted Layla unless she took a new husband within a month. Were his 3 daughters more important than the 10 orphans under his charge? These orphans were as much his responsibility as his daughters, more so. He was the only one who cared about them, but it didn't matter. Unless he followed orders, they would all be doomed. He had no choice. He had to keep his crew working as much for the good of his family as for their own. And if Gart did what his heart told him to, using his whip as a noose, tying it around his neck, then everybody was trapped but him. His mind rounded the whirlpool of his unacceptable choices before exhaustion brought him the best of gifts, dreamless sleep. Like most gifts, it ended too quickly. The next morning he sat beside Tone, who tried to inch away from him. Relax, boy, I will not hurt you. Just don't take me to your tent. That makes me feel yucky, Thornk. Gart pushed memories down, image of his own orphan drivers, feelings of self-loathing which almost broke him, memories of the shame that came as he aged, his body matured, and he understood the nature of the 10th time. The horror of his own urges developed and disgusted him, piercing shame as his heart sank in self-loathing that twisted and danced with anger, melding into the hatred which kept him alive. There had been a few years at the end of his army tour when he'd met Layla and learned of love, a gift from a generous woman and beautiful babies. Those days were gone and hatred drove him now. Hatred of Thark, hatred of his job, hatred of the Emperor. These hatreds and his desire to keep his children, all his children, protected, drove him forward. But there had to be a better life, a life with love. Gart slowly said, I don't do that. I never do that, and I'll do everything to make it stop for you. The boy's head dipped. Can you really protect me? I can try. Tone looked him in the eyes. The child had earth-brown eyes, the same color as his youngest daughter, water washing the white edges surrounding his pupils. I don't believe you. Words came to Gart's throat and fell away, and the memories charged back into his mind. The pain, the humiliation, the dark sadness locked in his soul. How many had there been like Tone, like Gart? How many more would come? His hand tightened on the whip, and the boy pulled back from it. Please don't. Lan came beside the boy, embracing him as Gart stood. He couldn't be cruel to these children. He wasn't a good man, but he couldn't accept that level of evil. Yet if he didn't, sooner or later, Thorpe or some other sergeant would decide he was too soft, take them from him and send him back to the front to die. When he died, Santon, Theory, and Hanla would become orphans, along with these children. There was nowhere to run, and if he did, all these children were doomed again. Gart had to fight, had to strike a blow that had the potential to break all the chains. There is no longer don't here. Blood must answer for blood. No longer can we tolerate this. This was too wrong. It had been for him, and now for these children. The only way out was to bring down the whole system. Gart would strike back, and there was only one target. As long as the Emperor was around, vileness poisoned the land. But the Emperor was immortal. Word had it death had not touched him in a century. Surrounded by his fanatical guards, sustained by the magic flowing through his blood, the Emperor was beyond any assassin's reach. Or so they said. But what if they told lies? What if the Emperor was as killable as anyone else? Maybe if he died, all their problems would be solved as the land collapsed into chaos. The Wizard Republic would take advantage and likely overrun the Empire. But it was a chance worth taking. The Empire said the wizards were evil, but how much more evil could they be than those who fed on their helpless ones? Countless children, including his daughters, faced danger, always a death away, always waiting with whips and bludgeons, standing inside open tent flaps, always lurking behind evil laughter and unchallenged power. Gart had to fight this. If not now, when? Fighting promised revenge, blood for blood, pain for pain, a promise of unexpected power transformed into fear. For this child and all the other children and the adults that grew from those children, he would strike a blow. He might not topple the whole corrupt structure, but he had to try, even if it cost him everything, because everything was already lost. The Emperor stayed near the front, exerting his magic over the battlefield. Gart saw his pavilion each time he reached the army, the shining black and silver tent large enough to hold 100 guards. A tent with guards around it day and night, but guards were soldiers, subject to long, boring duty, lax at night, and he only needed to get inside. Escape was not a concern so long as he struck the Emperor, possibly killing him, at least showing the tyrant he was not beyond the reach of his slaves. Insanity. His thoughts were insanity, as was his reality. Gart couldn't keep seeing children treated like this, couldn't know they were being beaten, humiliated, and broken. He wouldn't do his duty any longer, even with everything he risked. Despite the ridiculous odds, he had to act, even with what it would do to his daughters. They were doomed already. If he held back, he'd eventually fail as an orphan driver. Killing the Emperor was their only chance. All of his orphans stared back at him. Lan stepped forward, took his right hand in both of hers, staring into his eyes, challenging him. He broke contact with her and started the day's march. They reached the front line late the next afternoon, and he turned his wagon, leading it toward the pavilion. Gart heard a snap and one of the boys yelled, noises that would draw no attention from the camp. "Hey, what you orphans think you're doing?" Thornton said as he raised his whip for another strike, turning on Lan. "Stealing from the army, are you?" The sergeant hadn't seen Gart up front. Now the orphan driver ran back to the sergeant, his own whip held in both hands with no thought of delivering a lashing. Thornton dealt a blow to another child before looking up at Gart, finally striking land just as Gart drove his shoulder into Thornton's midsection and was thrown to the ground. "Gart, what are you?" Gart wrapped his whip around Thornton's neck and pulled it tight, collapsing the sergeant's throat. Imagining the children Thornton had abused, remembering his own orphan years and every orphan driver or sergeant who had struck him or worse. No force would stop him from killing the sergeant, least of all the 10 orphans watching him, some grinning, some quietly cheering, some shivering. At first there was a struggle, but after a few seconds, Thornton stilled, and all of them went limp with the realization of what had just been done. "Master," Aya whispered, "you've killed us all." Gart pulled the body off the road and into the trees, taking the sergeant's weapon belt, including his whip and bludgeon, before turning back to address his children. He looked at each child, the 6 boys and 4 girls, in the eye before speaking. "I can no longer do what I've been doing. The way we treat you is wrong. It has to end, and I am setting you free. I suggest you take some supplies and hide in the woods. Stay away as long as you can. Those of you who are older and stronger, help the others. Lead them past the army to the Wizard's Republic." "What are you going to do?" Aya whispered. "I'm going to kill the Emperor. He's at the heart of all this. If I take him out, maybe things change." "But he's immortal, isn't he?" "Maybe he is, maybe he isn't. There have been so many lies, it's hard to say what the truth is. Maybe he just needs a good taste of steel to die. Someone's got to find out, and that's what I aim to do. That's crazy. It's the only way I see that we've got a chance." They all stood silent for a moment before Aya nodded his head. "Okay, it's crazy, but I think you're right. Count me in." All the others nodded except for Lan and Tone. "I don't want to be a murderer," Tone said as Lan came up behind him, resting her hands on his shoulders. Some of these others jeered at Tone, but Gart held up his hand for silence. "Then don't be. You don't have to come with us. You probably won't survive in the woods, but I could tie you up and put you where someone will find you, just not too soon." "Then I'd be an orphan again?" Gart nodded. "Okay, I'll go with you too. It's better to be a murderer than an orphan." They rolled the carts further along the path and ducked into the woods, where Gart waited for night, thinking the whole time about the guards and the children who would fight them. Once the sun set, Gart ordered the others to lie low and stole through the woods in the fading light, stopping outside the clearing where the pavilion stood. He hung back behind the tree line to study the defenses. There were 4 guards in front near the opening flap, and 2 more on each side. They were alert and at the ready. Working around, he saw another 2 at the back. They each had spears, shields, and a couple had bows strung across their backs. At night, bow and arrow wouldn't be a problem, but there was no way he could get past 10 guards. But perhaps he could quietly eliminate 2 and push his way through a side or the back. If the tent was thoroughly staked down, but the size, 20 paces on each side, made it possible if the guards were tired and sloppy. The moon would be a dim crescent tonight, cloaking him in the woods behind the pavilion. Gart returned to the children, admonishing them to be quiet, and led them around the pavilion a good 20 steps from the tent, which was 10 steps beyond the tree line. The children all sat or lay, mouths closed tightly as only orphan mouths can be, while he crept close and watched the back of the pavilion. Night grew darker, while the guards held station, standing erect, facing directly behind the tent, alertly watching for trouble, the exact opposite of what he wanted to see. They were only 5 steps from each other, and Gart was sure their eyes were adjusted to the darkness as his. Impossible to sneak past them. impossible to overpower them without making enough noise to betray them all. The guard stood for hours, occasionally marching a little to relieve the boredom and loosen limbs, but otherwise holding station, ready for whatever came. Then came the break. One guard said something to the other and walked into the woods. The guard came past the tree line 3 paces from Gart, who barely moved until he saw the pants drop and the soldier prepared to relieve himself. Gart slid closer as the soldier focused on his need. A bludgeon in his hand, Gart came from behind with his final step masked by the tinkling, the weapon striking as the guard grunted in relief before silently folding. After Gart's target collapsed, the other guard said, "Hey, you okay?" The orphan driver answered with retching noises and grunts, bending over and watching the second guard approach through his legs, hoping the body wasn't spotted. But the body started moving. Gart saw small hands dragging it, binding and gagging the guard once they headed a few trees further into the woods and better hidden. He made more heaving noises. "Harnell, you all right?" The second guard was here now, and Gart whirled about, striking with the bludgeon again, but not so cleanly. This time the guard was watching him and partially deflected the blow, which struck his jaw rather than his temple. Even in the darkness, Gart could see the soldier's mouth was a bloody mess. He saw the sword stabbing toward him, but he'd been a fighter as well as a flogger and dodged the strike. A bludgeon versus a sword wasn't a fair fight, particularly when the noise was likely to bring unwanted attention. The guard grunted. Gart knew he was trying to form words, a broken jaw stopping the soldier from sounding an alarm. The soldier held his sword in both hands, pointed at Gart. The trees would be an advantage, and Gart spun around one, trying to come up behind the soldier, only to find his opponent waiting for him, striking a blow which kissed Gart's arm before the guard pitched forward. Suddenly staggering and off balance, Gart struck him across the back of the head and looked up to see Tom with arms extended. The boy must have snuck up behind the soldier and pushed him. Land and the others came binding and gagging the soldier as well. "They're both alive," Aya said after taking the pulse of the second guard. "Too bad." "Don't be so hard on them," Gart said. "They're probably orphans too." "Then why would they do this? How could they protect the Emperor?" "Sometimes people don't have a choice, and sometimes people, well, the pain blinds them and takes all decency from them, and they become like Thornk." "But not you," Aya said. "Not lots of people. If everyone who was abused became an abuser, the world would be nothing but pain. Seems that way to me." Gart thought of his wife and daughters. No, not everything was pain, but Aya may need time to understand this. Gart said, "It's a hard thing to understand that gentleness is strength. It's not bad they aren't dead. The Emperor is the one who needs killing." They ran to the tent, crouching as they crossed the open area. When they arrived, Land beckoned to him with a wave, showing him a spot where the tent claws met. 4 stakes came up, pulled from the ground with relative ease, and they had a doorway into the Emperor's fortress. Gart pulled his sword and went in first, entering a chamber only 3 steps deep, walled off from the rest of the tent by cloth. Flickering light marked the boundaries of the cloth wall, and speech came from the other side, excited voices wrapped in argument, loud enough to mask whispers in the words of children. "Who's there?" said a child voice similar to Tom's, the speech of a young boy, likely afraid in the dark. Gart saw a bed in a back corner with a small body sitting up in it. Gart dropped low and moved toward the bed. "I can hear you. Who's there?" "We are friends," Aya said as he followed. "Here to play." I don't have any friends, only uncles, aunts, and advisors. Uncles and aunts? What about your parents? Gart asked. I don't know where Mommy is. Daddy died, now I'm emperor, the child whispered. This was nothing more than a scared little boy. Anger flared, the lies ignited and illuminated in his mind. The immortal emperor, their god and master, the justification for all they had done, the enslaver of children, the eater of lives, was not immortal, not a god, nothing more than a small child. Another orphan lost in this world of pain. Guilt lay with someone else, possibly many people, these uncles and aunts and advisors. God felt the pommel of his sword, the one he had taken from the guards. It would do good work this evening, starting with whoever was beyond the sheet, hiding this child's bedroom. Aya and several of the others moved up to the emperor, sitting beside him on the bed, trading whispered stories and comforting this child so much better off than they, but so much weaker as well. Gart moved close to the cloth barrier between the bedroom and the rest of the pavilion and listened to voices he had never heard before. If we strike at the center, the line will break. We've tried this before, but we're better prepared now. We have more magic and we'll send the orphans across first. Oh, excellent plan. The children will distract them. Exactly. And then we will follow, cutting a hole in the line. Once we break through, there will be nothing between us and their capital. We will take the wizards' homes and they will crumble. They will strike back fiercely, hurling fireballs at our massed troops. We will lose hundreds, maybe thousands of soldiers. And whatever orphans they committed as well. True, but it does not matter as long as we prevail. We have to win soon. The war is too expensive, and the people will not take another winter of sacrifices. Who cares about the people? You will when they hang you. Gart fondled the pommel of the guard's sword, reaching toward the sheet, ready to kill as many of these parasites as he could, ready to die, his life a sacrifice to the hatred in his heart. When he felt two small hands clasp his arm, he turned and could just make out Lan, shaking her head, stringy hair bouncing with the movement. She had no right to deny him this. He reached across with his free left arm, wrapped both her wrists in his hand, breaking her grip, screaming her arms together, enjoying the grimace he could not see but was on his face. All pain was good now. Lan pressed her body against him, shaking her head. What was he doing? How could he hurt this girl so like a daughter to him? He brushed her face, now smooth, with the palm of his hand. Where had the scars gone? Aya came beside him, holding his sword arm as well, with hands that did not belong to an orphan. Don't do this. It won't do any good. Not true. He would kill at least a few, maybe many of the advisors, weakening the tyranny, and they would expose the lie of the emperor. But that wouldn't happen. Whoever these people were, these leaders of the empire, they told lie upon lie, and they wouldn't stop now. Kidnapping the boy would do no good. They would simply find another to take the title. Killing them would do no good, for there must be more elsewhere. Others willing to maintain the lie, others greedy for power, wealth, or whatever payment they received for the tears of the empire's children. There is no way to win here, he said. We win if we live. Maybe we don't change the entire world, but we change our world. Is there a way for us to escape? Gart, can you free us? He looked back at the cloth, vaguely listening to the plans of the murderers, wishing he was free to unleash his anger, knowing that he had children to take care of, turning his head to where the emperor sat. I think he's healed us somehow, Aya said. That was rich. The emperor must have healing magic, a wonderful thing in battle, unless you had to keep it a secret because it belonged to your little boy emperor. We can run, but we can't leave him here, Guard said. We can't hurt him, and if they took him, they would be pursued unless... Gart walked beside the emperor's bed and squatted down. The children fell silent, whispers dying at his approach. My name is Gart. What is yours? Mouth of Fire. A wonderful name for a healer. Yes, his magic had disappointed them. That's a mouthful. Would you mind if I called you Moth? That's a silly name. It'll grow on you. We're going to leave soon. Would you like to come with us? There were many other chances in this, but Moth coming of his own choice would help. Where are you going? Moth wasn't ready for all the truth, but part of it would help. We're going to run away and hide. Lots of people are dying because you're here. You know that, don't you? My advisors say not to worry about that. Dying for the emperor makes people happy. Was everything they told this boy a lie? Does that sound like the truth to you? Do you think your advisors would happily die for you? The boy ran hands over his bald pate before shaking his head. They say they would die for me, but I don't believe it. It's going to be a hard trip. Your advisors will chase you, seeking to capture or kill us all. You'll have to be very brave. Can you do that? I can be brave, and I never get tired. I lie here and pretend to sleep listening to them through the night. You are right. They are not good people. I'll come with you. They slid back out the back of the tent, carrying the emperor. Soon reaching the cart, yells echoing through the woods from the direction of the pavilion just as they arrived. Gart addressed Aya and the older orphans. Each of you grab a bag of food. We'll need to head deep into the woods and hide. That won't work, Moth said. They've got tracking magicians. And their hunters were trained soldiers armed and relentless, already marching, pursuing. He needed help, and there was only one place to find it. He looked up and marked the position of the moon, showing the direction they needed to turn, but not yet. Everyone, grab a loaf of bread and be ready to run. Aya, Lan, Thorin, Furkel. Keep the younger ones moving, making the best time possible. All follow me. He set out at a brisk walk, watching his steps, careful not to trip, counting his paces in groups of 10. When he reached 200 tens, he turned toward the moon, hoping he was around the flank of the army. He heard howling from the rear. That's the trackers, Moth said. They transformed themselves into wolves for the hunt. Pursuit wasn't far behind. Aya, we need to get the Emperor to the Wizards Republic's army. But they're all demons. That's what everyone says. We have to hope it's another lie. When you reach them, introduce the Emperor. Tell them your story and hope they use it wisely. What will you do? I'm going to stay here and fight, slow them up, and try to take out the wolves. We should be with you, Aya said. No, you need to get the Emperor to safety. Run. The orphans all took one last look at him, eyes darkened by the night, eyes reflecting little light, eyes taking a last look at a father before returning to the run. He pulled his sword and turned back in the direction he came, hiding behind a tree, waiting to spring a trap. 100 breaths later, a pair of small hands took a bludgeon from his belt. He looked down at Lan. What are you doing here? She held up 2 fingers and gestured for him to listen. When he did, he heard the howling of 2 wolves. Lan slid behind another tree, bludgeon ready. For reasons he didn't understand, a prayer came to his lips. A prayer filled with love for this girl beside him, for his orphans, for the Emperor, for his daughters. Here at the end, love returned to him, and he prepared for the wolves in a state of joy. Death was nothing to him now that he was finally alive. The man and girl hid, springing when the wolves arrived, killing the first 2, but the next 6 wolves tore into them. as they fought back, their blood a final sacrifice for the children they lost.